So we want our bow pieces. And as I said, I'm not lining mine, putting the interfacing on, because I want them to be quite floppy. Although this fabric is quite almost canvasy, so it might not be as floppy as I'd like it to be, but who knows. So we leave a gap for turning, and we stitch all the way around, again using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I shall do that with both the bow and the loop that goes around the centre of the bow, and come back when I've finished stitching. I didn't show you me stitching them out because I have to keep swapping machines, which is a bit of a pain. So I thought I'd just stitch, just straight stitch. It's not technically difficult, so I know you know how to do that. So I've stitched all around, leaving a gap in both pieces. But before I turn it, I need to snip the corners. Now, on my corners, I reinforce. I just do a back stitch on each corner, because when you turn, you have to push the corners out. Sometimes, whatever you're using to push them out can go through. Whereas if you double stitch, you're reinforcing those seams there. So it's always worth doing. And then you get your scissors, and instead of just cutting across where you've got bulk that will still be there, stitch down at an angle. And again, I was just checking that it was in the video then, that the film was right. Then again at an angle. So you've got that. It definitely makes a difference when you're turning the corners. So do that with all 4 corners. And then we want to turn them the right side out. So just turn them. I left quite a good sized gap, which makes it easier for me to turn. And then I get my tool. Now I use a variety of things for pointing the corners out, depending on what I'm using. If I'm using a really tough, hard material, then I'm inclined to use this. I don't know what it's called. It came in a set from Clover, I believe, with 2 things. And this is something that you can actually press the seam with, like that. And it's for pointing in the corners out. I've also got this, which is by Clover. It's got a round plastic end, and it's got it looks like a pen nib. And this is nice for turning as well, but it again can go through corners of softer fabrics. So for things like this sort of thing, I use my lovely big wooden needle. I had to give up knitting some years ago due to arthritis, and I nearly threw my wooden knitting needles away, but I'm glad I didn't, because they've come in handy for sewing. So you just want to poke out your corners as best you can. And if you find you do need to use a smaller tool, I use a crochet hook, which fell down earlier and I can't seem to find it. I have a lovely little crochet hook, and I use that as well because it's rounded, but that's okay. I'll use this because I really want that wooden knitting needle's quite thick, so it's not really pushing the corners out as sharply as I'd like them to be. I really want to have pointed corners. There you go. So that's that. And then I've got the opening, so I just iron that down like that. You can use double-sided tape or glue if you want to keep it shut for stitching. But now what I will do the same for this one, the bow loop, And then I'm going to top stitch all the way around, in closing up the gap. So I shall show you when I've top stitched. I'm going to press, then top stitch. Okay, so I've top stitched all the way around the pieces. So that's all done. And now what we want to do is stitch this loop closed. There's a piece of cotton that keeps trying to grab onto everything. Put it in the bin. So it can be a bit tricky. You don't want to sew it closed like that, because then you've got a bulk behind you. So you need to overlap it and stitch like that. Depending on what type of machine you've got, depends on how difficult it will be for you. So I'm going to pin it to start with. Actually, it just keeps it in place for me. Do that, and then put a pin in place. That keeps that closed enough to put it under the machine. And I don't want to accidentally run into the pin, so I've removed that now, and I'm going to stitch as far as I can. If you can't go into the middle of the bow, the loop, it's not a problem. As long as you stitch either side, that will be okay. So please don't worry if you can't get to the middle. No one's going to see it, and you're going to be stitching it down further with the bow. So that's that, and I've gone to there. So I've missed that tiny 5mm gap. So just snip the thread, tidy up the corners. Oh, and by the way, I found my crochet hook, so that's the delightful thing. Nice and thin. I said that's number 3mm. So now we want to put the bow into the loop. So just gather it together, leaving the join at the back. Pull the bow through, and then you fiddle about with it basically until you're happy with how you have it. You want to get it central, so make sure you measure it once it's in. That to me looks fairly central, so I shall measure, and at the furthest point it's going to 4.5 inches. Let's see this end. 4.5 inches. Well, there you go. My eye isn't too bad then. I've got it right. So I just want to imagine that's how it looks on the bag. And then move the bow loop aside and put your needle on, and just you don't want to sew all the way across. You're just literally putting the bow in place, just sort of anchoring it down really onto the back of the bow loop. Oh, my cutter didn't cut. Better. So I've got long threads now because I tried to pull it out of the machine without it being cut. So there you have it. On the back you can see, well, I don't know if you can see the stitching or not, it might be a bit dark. On the back you can see the stitching in place, but on the front you can't. And now we want to attach it to the bag itself. On the pleat side, obviously. and you want to put it at the bottom of the band, because you need that to be turning for the seam when you attach it to the lining. So you can measure it if you want to be completely accurate, or if you're happy to do it by eye, do it by eye. And then I'm just going to make sure you only pin it on the top side. You don't want to go through to the bottom, because that's got to be out of the way when you're sewing. So move the back out of the way, and then you want to do more or less what you did before, but you want to do it as much as possible, like as long as possible. I just want to make sure that I've got that bow not too high. And you do want to get as much in as possible, as length as possible, so you don't have the bow centre flopping down. I'll show you what I mean in a minute. So that's that side attached. Double check that the other side is out of the way. And now get the other side of the bow attached to the bag. So there we have it. Zoom out. It's not even that floppy really, because it is so strong, but it's not as stiff as the other one, so I'm happy with that. So that's the bow attached to the bag, nicely anchored on. It's not going forward because I've managed to stitch it quite high, so I'm pleased with that. So we put this aside now, and it's time to stitch the lining part. So it'll be the pockets first.